Hello, I'm Chuck Benoit. Welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. You know, one of the questions we ask on the Institute on the Constitution's The American View of the Constitution course is, what was the first war we fought after our war for independence? Well, the answer to that is the Barbary Pirates War. This is where our Marines got their nickname Leathernecks. Why? Well, because back then, like today, the Muslims enjoyed cutting off the heads of their enemies. So our Marines wore thick leather collars to minimize this particular Muslim bent. Now, I believe it's important to note that the war between Islam and America goes farther back than the 47 years so many pundits are pointing to. It goes back almost to the beginning of our nation's existence. And it's also important to note that Islam is not necessarily a protected religion here in America. Our founding fathers made it very clear that our moral foundations were in natural law, defined as the laws of nature and nature's God, the Bible. And our religious freedom is bound to the laws of nature, which means that if your religious activity violates the laws of nature, God's laws, you don't have the freedom guaranteed by our First Amendment. Now, adding to that, Sharia law is a competing governmental structure antithetical to our Constitution. So I would suggest that there could come a time where Islam would be legally banned from our nation. Now, how would that happen? Well, most likely not nationally, but possibly community by community. With that said, good morning, Mike Levine.
You know, Chuck, I just realized, how do I want to say it, that, I get fired up every Tuesday and Thursday morning for some reason. I don't know if it's your face that gets me going or what. But, in the morning I wake up and I'm fine, right? And then as we start, I start thinking about, what do we, not that obviously we think about what we're going to do on the show all the time, but as we get closer and closer to 11 o'clock airtime, I start getting a little more agitated, let's just say.
Do tell.
So, when I think about, our leathernecks being afraid of Islam chopping their heads off, I get a little agitated,
Well,
I'll tell you something, Chuck. I'm ready to go back to the days when men were tough. I hate to say it, but I really think that and again, on a different subject, right, that the assault on masculinity is a real problem. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'll turn the thing back over to you, and you can help us get on to the relevant subject matter that we're going to address today.
Yeah, well, we thought we'd take just a little bit of a side note, just a few minutes here up front, and talk about the war in Iran. I was just wondering, Mike, do you have any take or any particular thoughts you'd like to make? Kind of touching base on the idea that we have the Strait of Hormuz kind of shut off, and we're supposedly keeping product going in and coming out of Iran pretty much at a standstill, but you may have some different thoughts on that.
Well, Chuck, at this stage of my life, I find it really weird that I actually have the time to follow this stuff all day, which is a little nutty. I need to probably get therapy or something. But I do follow it all day because it is a very interesting subject, right? So, let me start by saying, the Iranians thought, because again, as Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of War, love to point out, that the Iranian Navy is at the bottom of the Persian Gulf right now. 159 of their ships, which is like almost all of their Navy, is at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. And they are literally controlling the Persian Gulf through fast boats, which are the equivalent of a Boston whaler, which is a recreational boat in the United States. And literally they load up a dozen Islamic Republican Guard Corps special forces guys, throws them in the back of this Boston whaler with some automatic weapons and RPGs, rocket propelled grenades, and stuff like that. And they threaten the entire world commerce with these little fast boats, right? That are like approaching these massive barges and tankers, right? And then a dozen guys, jump on board these boats, and it's just horrible. I mean, well, horrible. But long story short, our military is quite capable. We shoot those things out of the water. So I wouldn't want to be a special forces operative at the IRGC, and when I get the order to jump in a fast boat and attack an oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz, I'm saying that I'm not going to be on the planet very long. I'm about to go to Allah, and maybe on a good day, Allah will grant me the 7 virgins or whatever it is they get for being a martyr, for Islam. But that's what their destiny actually is. So, of course, the Trump administration played a great card when he blocked off the Strait of Hormuz, which means that Iran no longer, their little pseudo blockade really doesn't work for them anymore, because they're not being able to ship in and out because we blockaded the blockade, their blockade, right? So basically, their strategy actually turned against them. And even, we've turned around, I think the number's somewhere around 52, probably higher now, ships from attempting to penetrate the blockade. And of course, a Chinese ship was caught up in that. There was the Chinese shipped on a barge or whatever the materials that are required in order to create the rocket fuel that propels those intercontinental ballistic missiles and stuff like that. So we have the Strait of Hormuz blocked down, which is great news. But you and I were talking before going on air, Chuck, and if you could pop that map up real quick, I just want people to understand what the situation actually is. So Chuck, if you wouldn't mind, just you can see the Strait of Hormuz there that runs up on the south and southwest side of Iran. And Chuck, if you would just go through that list of countries on the east side, so the audience knows which countries border Iran on the east up to the Caspian Sea. Chuck, will you go through that for us?
Sure. You have Pakistan down here, then Afghanistan.
Okay, keep in mind, Pakistan is hosting the negotiations, right? So we're negotiating with a mediator in the negotiation that is pro-Iran. Chuck, people need to understand that. Pakistan is pro-Iran. Don't forget that we took out Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Continue.
Right. Then we have up here Afghanistan.
Right. We know the history of Afghanistan.
Sure.
Next.
Turkmenistan.
Okay. So
then the Caspian
they're not
Sea.
an ally of ours.
Right.
And then the Caspian Sea, right? So the point to be made about the Caspian Sea is on the north side of the Caspian Sea, that abuts Russia. So Russia can provide relief. All the countries you just named, plus Russia, have the ability to ship goods and services into Iran from those countries across land. And in the case of Russia, they can ship materials into Iran using the Caspian Sea. But what people need to know about the Caspian Sea is the Caspian Sea is not a deep water port, and the Strait of Hormuz is. So, that's kind of what we're dealing with there. So the point is that the blockade, while it is very, very effective, it does not totally shut down Iran, Chuck.
Right. So at some point, we probably will have to make some changes in what we're doing to bring this war to a close. Just a minute, you want to just shut this down and we'll get on to today's broadcast?
Well, let's just make the point, Chuck, that we're dealing with a theocracy in Iran that is, I'm going to just use the word fanatical. And, maybe we're fanatical too. Who knows? I would protect my country at all costs. They would have to kill me before I would agree to become an Islamic state here in the United States. So maybe we're not that dissimilar. Maybe we do have some fanatics on our side. Who knows? I might qualify to be one of those. You never know. Actually, you do know. I'll just go ahead and own it.
There you
Right?
go.
I will die before I live in an Islamic run country, and, unless God inspires me somehow to continue living in opposition. But I'll have that conversation with God. So let's see. So the next step becomes people need to understand. So what do we have to do to actually win this, right, Chuck? And
Yeah.
there's 92, I'm going to call them provinces. That could be an improper term, but regions or provinces in Iran. And the Islamic Republican Guard Corps is Iran's special forces. Plus, they have a regular army in addition to that. And of course, then you have local police and law enforcement in all of those 92 provinces. So, my point to you is that because we're facing this, what we're going to label a fanatical theocracy, in order to win the war, we have to control all of those 92 provinces. So, that's why boots on the ground is not a good idea. So, people are saying we can't win this war from the air alone. I beg to differ. I think we can win this war from the air alone, particularly because we know that there's a significant population in Iran who would love to overturn the theocracy. So I believe that when we take out not only the national leadership of the Islamic Republican Guard Corps, but when we also let the military of Iran, including law enforcement in Iran, know that they're all targets of American and Israeli airstrikes, then and then start. Of course, they're not going to fold just because of the threat, but the next step might be to kind of start at the top, but work your way down until you literally start taking out police stations in these 92 provinces. And when you start getting into that, now it could take a while, but on the other hand, we've hit like more than 13,000 targets in Iran so far. That's just us. Okay. The Israelis have hit a equal number or maybe more. So the idea that we can take out police stations and military facilities in those individual provinces, I don't believe is unrealistic at all, Chuck. So that's kind of what, in my view, that's what it takes to win the war. I'm no military expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, Chuck.
There you go. There
And
you
I
go.
do listen to a lot of news, and I've listened to what a lot of people have to say about it. And I believe it not necessarily winnable, but I tell you right now, we can further degrade Iran significantly further than it's already degraded in the air by targeting these individual provinces and taking out their military bases and law enforcement facilities in those provinces, which leads us to a better place to actually achieve regime change. And I believe that is, in fact, the goal at this point. Without regime change, Iran will just emerge back to the same Iran that it's always been. And if that's okay, you and I kind of joked before coming on air that I am a baby boomer. I was born in 1958, so I'm an old man now. But my generation still believes in being proactive and defending ourselves against our adversaries. And this adversary will kill us. Death to the big Satan, death to the little Satan. This adversary will kill us if we give them the opportunity to, and if we don't stop them, which, then they will have an opportunity to do that. They've got terrorist cells in our country, and we're about to see that, Chuck. These guys, in their last-ditched effort, will activate Iranian terror cells, Islamic terror cells in the United States of America. That is coming soon, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, well let's just shut this down because we weren't gonna plan. We were planning on doing a whole show on this. Let's get it a little bit closer to home, like maybe Lake County, Florida.
I know that neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. We were talking about the idea of whether or not it would make sense to charter Lake County. So why don't you give us your take on should Lake County, Florida, become a chartered county?
You know, Chuck, I would love to be able to get our audience the documents that I emailed over to you. I wonder if we can post those in the comments or something like that to
Should, yeah,
give our audience a list of the things that I have written down over the last couple of months. Um, you know, just to let people know what where my head is on certain things. But you know, it's so interesting because today, Chuck, all of the counties and some of the municipalities in the state of Florida are wailing that the state of Florida is overreaching their authority into our cities and counties, which we talk about constantly on this show. So the next step becomes, and then let's just, so, you know, I would suggest that our county commission and some of our municipalities in Lake County, Florida, and other counties around the state want relief from the overreach of state government into our cities and counties. So the next step becomes what other tools are at our disposal in order to protect ourselves from that overreach, and particularly today, because so many citizens in Lake County are opposed to the high density, poorly managed growth that's happening in Lake County, as indicated by the traffic jams and those kind of things that we're experiencing. And I believe that a charter could be the solution to managing growth in Lake County, Chuck.
Yes, let me throw this up real quick. We have, in particular, one of these documents that you want me to try to get to our people. Point number 5 under this, which is irrelevant. But Florida Constitution, Article 8, Section 1A, the state shall be divided by law into political subdivisions called counties. Well, that's pretty interesting here. But the next one, counties are established in 2 categories. Chartered and unchartered. And right now, Lake County is uncharted. We were talking about, well, does it make sense for us to become a chartered county? Why don't you explain your thoughts on that?
Well, Chuck, here's the deal, right? So, for example, over many years, I'm going to say since 2010, periodically this subject comes up. And of course, the people that run Lake County hate the idea of having a charter. And the argument they have is, well, we want less rules and regulations, not more. So the question becomes, we want less rules and regulations on who? And I would suggest that the population, our small businesses, privately owned businesses and stuff like that, certainly should be able to conduct business the way they want to. And I would just put a caveat, without destroying the environment, right? We don't want, the developer community to pollute our waterways, for example. I would say that landowners in their bundle of rights, do not have the right to pollute our waterways, but we allow them to do it anyway. So that's another piece of the charter, could be incorporated into the charter. So the charter really gives a framework for how the Board of County Commissioners and how the political subdivisions within the counties are regulated. So my point is this, that while we, the citizens of Lake County, Florida, do not want a lot of regulations on us, I believe that it is favorable to regulate the government. But we've never had that. We've never really had a grassroots population in Lake County that was really educated enough to stand up and make the argument against the stakeholders who benefit from an unchartered county. Because stakeholders who have the money and influence to regulate what goes on in the county without a charter, they just flex their muscle and get things done the way they want them done. And having rules and regulations and obstacles to them getting what they want would be difficult, onerous on them. It would make things more difficult for them to get what they want. But I personally believe that putting a charter on the county would make, I like having rules and regulations for government and less rules and regulations for the citizens, Chuck. So that would be a positive on my side, to say that I would not necessarily, on that particular subject, that would be a mark in favor of chartering, Chuck.
Well, let's move on to another point that you bring up. The Florida Constitution provides as follows: municipalities may be established or abolished and their charters amended pursuant to general or special law. What's so important about that, Mike?
Well, the interesting part about that is, Chuck, that it just used the word charter in the definition of what is a municipality. So municipalities have charters. All of them have charters, but the counties don't have charters. So if you go to the next bullet point down there, it talks about whether municipal ordinances supersede county ordinances or not. And I've talked to the county commissioners enough to know that they are frustrated with the behavior of many of the municipalities in the county, particularly in the area of annexation, yet they have no power to control the municipalities. So if we take a look at landmass as what determines authority, the state of Florida obviously is the governing body that creates counties and municipalities. So why would this county, the larger landmass, not have superiority over the municipalities, which are basically subsections of the county, Chuck? So I would prefer, I think that it'd be a very good check if you think of it in the terms of checks and balances. I'd like for the county to have some authority over the municipalities. What do you think, Chuck?
Yeah, well, it kind of makes sense to me. It says basically in unchartered counties, that would be Lake County, that the municipal ordinance do supersede county ordinances. And, it just seems to me like it might make a lot of sense for us to begin to more adequately consider chartering.
So, for example, if county ordinances supersede municipal ordinances, that would put the county commissioners in a position where they could protect our farmland. They could protect density outside of municipalities. They would have a much stronger position when they're trying to negotiate with municipalities than they have now, Chuck.
Yes, that brings us to the next point on your list here. It says in chartered counties, the county charter determines whether municipal ordinances supersede county ordinances or if county ordinances supersede municipal ordinances. So that's a determination built off of the charter that you would have to obviously make.
Absolutely. So, for example, if I was faced with an up or down vote on a county charter that said municipalities' ordinances supersede county ordinances, and I would be a no vote. I would support a charter that put county ordinances superior to municipal ordinances, because I would like for the cities to have to collaborate with the county before they I would like to see the counties have to approve the city's land use maps. Now, of course, if you get into the city councils and the mayors and county city managers and stuff like that, then they may have a little heartburn with that. But you know what? I don't care. I think that the larger geographical body should govern over the smaller jurisdictions, and we all agree in Lake County, with the exception of people who financially benefit from poorly planned high density development that we're facing. There are people, of course, that get beyond rich off of those programs, including just the absolute skyrocketing tax base that happens when you build these high density developments in the cities in particular, but in the county as well. So yeah, I'm in favor of a strong county and a subordinate municipal structure to our state government, which goes obviously state, county, municipality. That is the order that I would like to see the power structure ingrained in. And today, we don't have that. Today, we have municipalities superseding counties, and I'd like to flip it. And the only way to do that is to charter, Chuck.
Yeah, now, just your assessment of, our, first of all, regarding our 5 commissioners, we're getting ready to lose Anthony Sabatini because he's he has to resign in order to run for Congress. But beyond that, who do you think might right now be interested in taking up this idea?
Well, that is interesting because there's only 5 commissioners, right? So I think that's a very heavy lift because nobody's going to want to be responsible for it, right? I mean, the stakeholders in Lake County for decades for sure have opposed, they have intentionally opposed chartering the county. So if anybody that talks about chartering is going to fly in the face of powerful people in Lake County who oppose chartering. So this is not, could not be good for business, okay? If you oppose stakeholders who, if you defy stakeholders who are opposed to chartering, but I would be willing to do that if, you know, my idea is, I think I am pretty convinced that chartering the county would be a good idea, but I'm not going to go out and say 100%. I would like to do a little more research on it and figure out exactly what we would accomplish by chartering before I absolutely endorse the idea. But when I think about it, I find a lot more positives than negatives associated with chartering. So I'd like to hear from people, and you're welcome to weigh in the comments and whatever. Our emails and communications is available to all of our audience there. But I'd love to hear both points in favor of chartering and against, because I think it's something that would really go a long ways to mitigating this overdevelopment thing that's going on in Lake County. And I think it would give our county commissioners a whole lot more authority over the process, and we would be able to better plan and implement not a lot of things, but growth management being a major one, Chuck.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we could possibly dig down a little bit deeper right now, but in our last couple of minutes, again, one of the things we began to talk about were some of the more, I guess, known Republican candidates for governor. And you had some interesting thoughts on each one, and I don't mean to kind of take you by surprise because we weren't really going to talk about that. We have about 2 or 3 minutes. Your take on where we really are with the main guys like Byron Donald, Paul Renner, James Fishback, and Bobby Williams and Jay Collins as well. You just had some interesting thoughts earlier, and if you can give our audience.
Well, Chuck, again, I'm starting to feel like here we are, like we're in the middle of May now. And, it's just that period of time. It's like the calm before the storm, I would suggest. There's one way to look at it. And, the filing, let's see, Friday is 12th. So June 12th is the Friday when qualifying deadline ends. So I don't know, what's Monday? 11, 10, 9, 8, maybe the 8th, I guess. So the window, the 1 week window, in order to file and qualify is between June 8th and June 12th. So we're coming up on that really, really quick. And I was talking to Paul Renner at the Country Club of Mount Dora Republican Club meeting where he spoke a couple of weeks ago. And his comment was that, front runner, for all practical purposes, Byron Donalds, is not picking up support. And, Donalds has the war chest. He has the endorsement from Trump. Yet his support really isn't growing. So it could be that Byron Donalds has persuaded as many Republican voters as he can, and that may not change. So, the next step becomes, again, as we discussed off camera, you would have thought that since Ron DeSantis appointed Jay Collins to be the lieutenant governor, keeping in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that Ron DeSantis said a year or two ago that he was willing to abolish the position of lieutenant governor. He said willing to abolish the position of lieutenant governor. So why did he appoint Jay Collins to the position if he said himself that he doesn't really need a lieutenant governor? So that was a political appointment, long story short. So when Casey DeSantis, who has not really had any overture about running for governor lately, and the filing deadline, the qualifying deadline is coming up pretty soon, you would think that Ron DeSantis would be endorsing Jay Collins, but that's not happening. And it could be that he's not endorsing Collins because Paul Renner was the Speaker of the House under DeSantis in 23 and 24. So maybe DeSantis said when Paul Renner got into the race that was a bad idea for Renner to get into the race. Yet he's not endorsing Jay Collins, and we know that he doesn't support Byron Donalds, who is the Trump endorsed nominee. And we could get into a little deeper dive on DeSantis, but I don't think we have time for that today. So we have that. So we have Byron, we have Renner, of course we have James Fishback, who's taken this completely unconventional approach, which is great. I certainly love people who take an unconventional approach to politics. But, he's really focusing on the youth and the anti-Israel crowd, people who don't like the war in Iran and people who believe that Israel is controlling the foreign policy of the United States, and he's going to do everything he can to detach the state of Florida from Israel. By the way, Ron DeSantis said that he is the most pro-Israel governor in the United States of America. So that is definitely a split between Fishback and DeSantis on Israel. DeSantis, big supporter of Israel. Fishback, big opponent of Israel. So that takes care of three. Then you get into, let's see, you still have Bobby Williams sitting out there. So it's Donalds, Renner, Collins, Fishback, Williams. And, Williams is steady as she goes, but of course, no political history there, and same with Fishback as well. But so, again, I think that Bobby Williams has pretty much, tapped into his base as well, although I do believe that Bobby Williams has a bigger upside than maybe Byron Donalds. Proportionately, you might make some arguments against the concept that I just laid out for you. But anyway, so there's a piece there. So those are the five candidates, and it's just really interesting that I'm seeing the race as somewhat stagnant. As these guys campaign around the state, I don't really see the perception or the support for these candidates changing that much, Chuck. So if that's true, I guess you would say that Byron Donalds will probably be the nominee. What are your thoughts, Chuck? Do you have anything to add to that? Or
Mike, you always do a really good job of digging down into things. We have kind of gone through our time. We've been all the way from Iran to the governor's race to Lake County. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. So unless you've got something else to say, I'm going to sign off.
Well, I'm just saying that August 18th is going to be a really interesting day for the state of Florida. That's going to determine, of course, the primary election. So the Democrats will decide who they're running. I guess maybe David Jolly or somebody like that. And then we're going to decide among this, I would say, relatively unfavorable slate. I mean, I just don't see anybody out there that really the vast majority of Republicans are, lining up against. Of course, Byron Donalds would be probably the strong suit because the establishment likes him and Trump endorsed him and he's got the money. So, he's probable winner. But I don't see Floridians being excited about Byron Donalds if he gets elected governor. I think Byron Donalds is pretty easy target for the Democrats, right? I think, there are candidates in the race who make a better case against the Democrats than Byron Donalds does. So that's an interesting piece. But so, we're just at a very interesting little time right now, kind of the eye of the storm, as I alluded to earlier. So it will be very interesting to see what happens on August the 18th. And then we go into the general election in November. And of course, we're going to be living in a completely different Florida once the new governor is installed and I don't see big swings in the legislative roster, but not in the state house anyway. But of course, redistricting is another subject that we probably should tackle another time in more detail. But so anyway, because I'm telling you something right now, Florida is going to be a whole lot different in 2027 than it is in 2026, Chuck.
Well, thank you for that, Mike, and thank you all again for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook and X at Restore Our Rep 76. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program. And remember, if you are unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.